I do think that we are in a time, just kind of socially, politically, the whole world, right? Like people are looking for answers. People are looking for tools. People are looking for a handhold to deal with how crazy life is. And I think so many times that energy can come with a lot of urgency,
Mhm.
which ends up kind of shooting ourselves in the foot in the long run, right?
Welcome to Room to Evolve. I'm Jessica Goulding. These episodes are here as sources of inspiration to help you notice what might be calling you into something new, even if, or especially if, it doesn't make any sense. When there's a stirring in your heart or a nervousness in your belly, I hope you pause and notice. I hope you enter into a little inquiry around what that might be. It doesn't matter if you're in your 20s figuring things out, or right in the middle of building your life, or on the other side of retirement, wondering what's next. Following those inner nudges can lead us to scary thresholds, yes, but also to a more colorful and fulfilling life and purpose. It might not always look grand on the outside, but when it comes from something deep within you, it's exactly enough. Before we meet this month's guest, I want to invite you to visit roomtoevolve.com. This website is where I'm hosting my weekly blog, this podcast, videos you can practice with, and invitations to events, pilgrimages, and retreats. I created it to not just be a website, but a place, a room, where you can step out of the noise and into a quiet space. It's connected to Substack, and I hope you decide to subscribe. That way, you'll receive weekly reflections right in your inbox, along with future posts and resources available only to subscribers. So come on in and say hello by subscribing to Room to Evolve. It's a sanctuary for you and other like-hearted folks to tune out the noise and tune into your spirit. "2003 was a year of change and revelation in my life. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was standing on the threshold between dance and motherhood, between performance and practice. My husband Nick and I spent several months living in a small fishing village on the coast of Italy that year. It was a dream we created when we imagined what we wanted to do together before settling down and starting a family. When we returned to New York City, my place in my dance company had been taken. So it was time to decide what was next. I knew I didn't feel like going out and auditioning again or anymore, because I had been there and done that, but I wasn't quite finished choreographing and performing. So I decided to apply for the Masters of Fine Arts program at SUNY Purchase, a college just outside the city. I'll never forget taking the commuter train out there, watching the early fall foliage go by and wondering what was in store. I took class with the grad students and then had an interview with the department heads. I told them I wanted to pursue choreography along with performance. They said something I'll never forget, and I've thought about my response so many times since then. They said, "Here at SUNY Purchase, we don't focus so much on the product. You might spend a whole year working with improvisation and workshopping movement, never producing a performance." What? Never put on a show? Never see the results of all those hours of creating? No thanks, I said. So instead, I formed my own company and produced a full evening of new work. And to this day, I'm really proud of that work. I also enrolled in yoga teacher training because yoga had captured my heart and mind. I retired from the New York dance scene in 2004, and we moved to Austin to start a family. I had my 200-hour teacher training certificate in hand, and I was ready for the next thing. Yoga has taught me something over the last 20 plus years. The process matters. The fruits of your creative endeavors may never be known, and sometimes you have to be okay with that. So what my 20-something self couldn't accept, my almost 50-year-old self is finally learning. It's not all about the show or the results. It's about the transformation, the revelation, and the evolution. This way of thinking does not come naturally to me. And that's what I began to understand when I was first introduced to the Enneagram many years ago. In case you're unfamiliar, the Enneagram is a map of 9 different personality patterns, each shaped by a core motivation, a way of seeing the world, and an often underlying unconscious fear. What I find most meaningful about it is that it doesn't just look at what we do, it points toward why we do it. So, as an Enneagram 3, I love a performance and I excel at producing. That's the light or the gift of my type. But when it's ego driven, or when I believe my self worth is dependent on what I do instead of who I am, the shadow emerges. And if you're in any way interested in discovering your shadow or the unconscious patterns that might be shaping your life, the Enneagram is a beautiful framework. It helps you understand who you are, why you do, what your gifts are, and where your challenges live. So now, armed with my Enneagram type, I can look back at myself with compassion. My self-worth was tied to what I produced and the accolades that came with it. Creating for creating's sake seemed like a waste of time. Over time, working through these patterns, I've come to enjoy the journey and surrender the results most of the time. I still produce, that's my gift, but I also know I'm lovable no matter how it turns out. So whether you're new to the Enneagram or a seasoned student, I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. Today's guest is Abi Robins, a certified Enneagram teacher who studied with Helen Palmer, Marion Gilbert, Peter O'Hanrahan, and others through the narrative Enneagram in Menlo Park, California. They are also a CIAYT yoga therapist with the International Association of Yoga Therapists and studied at Yoga Yoga in Austin, Texas. Abi's teaching combines the deep and transformative insight of the Enneagram with the holistic and down-to-earth practices of yoga therapy. They seek to share these two powerful systems to help people better understand themselves and those around them and live more fulfilling and meaningful lives. Yeah. Enjoy the conversation about the Enneagram. Abi Robins, welcome to Room to Evolve.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here too. I've invited you on for a couple reasons. One, okay. I love the work you're doing in the world, through your coaching, your workshops, your book. Everything that you're putting out there comes with such depth and soul, and I appreciate that. And we have this common language of yoga therapy, so that makes it kind of a little another dimension that we can bring in. And second, in this podcast, I like to talk about kind of personal evolution, meaning how do people evolve towards their truest nature and deepest self? So what are the tools, the practices, the experiences that kind of beckon them to their purpose, their joy, their deepest sense of belonging? And so just want to kind of have that running in the background.
Yeah.
As we enter conversation about the Enneagram.
Yeah.
I think it would be good to start with a quick definition. And if it does, if it's not quick, so be it. But let's just get on the same page as to what this is.
Yeah. I feel like you had asked earlier, like, should we go through all the types? And I was like, there's no way to do it in time. But I can give you a description of the Enneagram that I find very helpful pretty quickly. It is a psycho-spiritual self-awareness tool. It blends the best of Eastern religious traditions and Western psychology and gives us a map of the human experience that allows us to move more effectively and efficiently towards who we're really meant to be. There's my elevator pitch.
Yeah. It's so clear.
Yeah,
some of
right?
Psycho spiritual
Self-reflection tool.
Self-reflection. I'm writing this down because,
Yeah, that might not have been what I said the first time, but it's what I
but
said this
it's
time. So
working. Yeah. Well, because it does, it addresses the whole person.
absolutely.
And I think that's what makes it unique. I mean, there's other, typing systems out there. Are there any
Mhm.
that you like to say it's not like this or it's different because, like, what makes it unique beyond that beautiful
Yeah.
definition?
So for me, there are a few things. First of all, it's dynamic. So when I think about things like the Myers-Briggs or DISC or StrengthsFinder or all of these, there's a color one and there's like a square one. I don't know. There's a lot, right? And then you also have just your run-of-the-mill BuzzFeed quizzes. Um, the thing that makes the Enneagram different is that it's dynamic, right? It accounts for the way we move and operate in the world. It accounts for the fact sometimes we look like a certain thing when we feel really good, and we look like something totally different when we feel really bad. Um, so there is a the box of your type is actually very expansive to start off with. And then beyond that, the Enneagram takes into account that we will change over the course of our lives. And with intention and presence, we will hopefully change for the better. And sometimes we change for the worst. That's, that's life. But the Enneagram accounts for that as well. Like it shows you the journey. That can make it a little bit harder to get into at first, right? Like, I don't believe that the 10 or 20 question test is going to do a very good job of showing you where you are. I don't personally believe that the tests are all that helpful at all. And I have kind of a different approach for how to usher people into an understanding of their type. Um, but the Enneagram is dynamic. It's allowing for the ways that we move and change and grow and evolve or devolve or whatever it might be for this stage of life that you find yourself in. But the other thing that I think I've really leaned into over the last several years that I think is especially helpful is that the Enneagram is very embodied. It talks about the body. It talks about how this is a place of our intelligence in a way that inspires the action necessary to actually allow ourselves to grow and develop. Where I've seen other personality systems, and it does tend to be a very, very heady thing to talk about. And the Enneagram can certainly be that. Don't get me wrong. You can go down some deep rabbit holes. But at its core, it is foundationally embodied. There's no way to have an experience of the Enneagram without coming into an experience of your body. And that's something that I find really important and meaningful when talking about the differences between this and other systems.
It's like what you were describing. It is the whole person and how you're
Yeah.
feeling in it. And just I don't know if we mentioned before, there's 9 types, and that's
Yes.
what you're saying is the big box.
Hmm.
And um, I'm gonna go full confession. I'm a 3.
Go for it.
And I have to agree with you about the way to coming to terms, or not coming to terms with so much, although
Although
there
there
is
is
that. There is a
that.
lot of that, of recognizing yourself in one of
Mhm.
these 9 personality types.
Yeah.
Um, Personally, as a 3, and I remember speaking on a panel that you had
Yeah.
about this,
Yeah.
that because I was in the yoga world and, where peace was like, that was
Hmm.
the thing we're all going for is to be that
Yeah.
peaceful person. And so,
Shanti. Yeah.
yeah. And then so to like live into that image as a 3, I thought I
Mm.
was a 9.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with the numbers yet, don't worry. Just my point in saying all of that is to know that you can mistype for a while.
Oh, yeah.
And I think those are all interesting journeys to go on.
Absolutely.
I have a dear friend who
Absolutely.
spent a full year and a little bit of time in each one, just going, oh, how does this feel? How does this
Mhm.
feel? Right. And she
Yeah.
landed where
Yeah.
she is right.
And that's one of the things that I love sharing with people about the Enneagram because it's a little more complicated, it's a little more nuanced. It's not this like cut and dry, oh, you're just this. Like it takes some more effort to find your type. But the beauty of it is that none of the effort is ever wasted. If you show up and you spend a year working on yourself thinking you're a nine, and then later you realize that you're a three, like in your case, or a five or a four or a whatever, like it doesn't matter. The effort you spent that year working on issues that you thought were your issues as a nine, that's still helpful.
Mhm.
It's still supportive on your journey. There are so many different aspects that play into how we see ourselves. Any work to become aware of who we are is always going to be supportive. Like it's not wasted. And I think when people hear that, there's kind of a relaxation that can happen around it because I work with a lot of people. I do a lot of typing interviews and people are like, I got to figure it out. Ah, what if I have it wrong? Oh my God. And it's like, it's not that big a deal. Yes, it is better for you in the long run to know your type, but that process could take years
Well,
and that's
yeah,
okay.
like like it's a journey.
Actually, it is a journey.
Yeah. Have you walked a labyrinth? Are you familiar with labyrinth
Yes, I'm
practice?
very familiar with labyrinths.
Okay, so that's kind of also
Yeah.
a big part of the background of this work.
Yeah.
Is I consider that kind of a room to evolve, and all these
Mm,
different modalities can be their own room, right?
yeah.
So this is that room, and as you're talking about that exploration of
Hmm.
being this
Hmm.
number and that, I'm like picturing somebody walking a labyrinth and then they go whoop and they have to do about face because that's the path that
Exactly.
took them on.
Yeah.
And then you might spend a long time like coming around the outer edge. I'm thinking I'm
Uh-huh.
this, whoop, and it's
Uh-huh.
going to flip you back. And that
Yeah.
is
Or you
so,
think that you're right there almost to the center and then
yep,
go in the other
whoop.
direction. Oh no, I'm not. I'm not at the end.
I
I
hope
have
this
more to
helps
walk.
really, yeah, helps people really go like,
Yeah.
I'm going to take some time with this and luxuriate in it.
That's a good word for it because I do think that we are in a time just kind of socially, politically, the whole world, right? Like people are looking for answers. People are looking for tools. People are looking for a fucking handhold to deal with how crazy life is. And I think so many times that energy can come with a lot of urgency,
Mhm.
which ends up kind of shooting ourselves in the foot in the long run, right? And the more we can find ways to relax and kind of shed that urgency, the faster we get to where we want to go
Yeah.
anyway. Like that's the beautiful, like counterintuitive experience of these spiritual things is like when we drop the urgency and allow ourselves to just be where we are, so we almost magically find ourselves where we want to be.
We get out of our own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it's very true for this process of discovering your type. Relax. It'll be so much clearer when you relax.
Hmm.
And yeah, and it's like be okay with it being a journey. I mean, this is why I don't like tests. I don't think that the Enneagram tests are helpful or useful or right
Yeah.
uh almost ever. Like because the foundational thing for me is the way we receive information will have a massive impact on what we can do with that information. If I just punch some multiple choice whatevers into a computer and then a computer spits out a number, I've had a transaction with a machine, I got what I wanted, and I can just move on with my life, right? The Enneagram is not a machine. It
Mhm.
does not function the way a machine functions. It's more like a garden, right? Like, yeah, you're going to put effort in over here, but then something's going to sprout over there. right? Like, and you don't have control over it, but you're a part of it. And that is a better way of operating and interfacing and relating to this information because it's more than just a checkbox. It is a journey. And finding your type is the first part of that journey. And maybe the first phase is really short for some people. Maybe the first phase is really long for some people. And then it transforms into something else. But just getting handed a number from a computer is not going to give you the space you need to relate to this information in a way that actually supports your transformation.
I I'm totally on board with this. And um I got to mine because somebody said you're a three. And then I was like, okay. And I had to go through the whole journey of like
Mhm.
undoing, redoing, undoing, redoing.
Yeah.
So I always like to remind myself to try to not type others. That is one of
Mhm.
the traps. That is one of the traps that we go around pointing at people and saying, oh, you're
Uh-huh.
this, you're that.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
then we
Uh-huh.
dismiss.
Yep.
And that
Mhm.
is so anti the spirit
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what this work is.
Yeah. Because, right, as one of my favorite songwriters of all time says in one of her songs, Ani DeFranco says, every tool is a weapon if you hold it right.
Mm,
And we like to hold things like weapons, right? Because they protect us, right? So if I can say, oh, well, you're this, and so you should do something differently so I can be more comfortable, it misses the point that it's actually my job to be aware of how I'm interpreting this situation. What am I reading? What am I subliminally putting out into the relationship? How am I acting unconsciously? And how is that impacting what I'm experiencing? That's our job
mhm.
if we are working with this tool. And again, I tell my clients all the time, yeah, it's helpful to know other people's types. And you can do some operating with an educated guess. That's natural, right? But at the end of the day, none of that matters. None of other people's types matters. The only thing that matters is you and your type and your journey. And are you doing the work right now?
Yeah.
In this present moment, are you being aware of your patterns? Are you being aware of the things that you habitually think, feel, and do?
It's a tough call.
It's so tough.
Yeah.
And this is
It's a
why I have to combine it with yoga therapy, right? We can't actually do this work if we don't have the capacity, right? And that's what yoga therapy does so well is it actually gives us the capacity. It gives us the tools to engage with the work that the Enneagram's inviting us into.
okay, so you've got one in each hand.
One in each hand.
We've got the Enneagram, and you're helping a client discover their type, which I do
Mhm.
want to go back to your approach.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we've got yoga therapy.
Yeah.
And now, like when I think of yoga therapy and the therapeutic application of
Hmm.
yoga, when I think of the Enneagram, I think of the Yoga Sutras,
Hmm.
the map of the mind,
Hmm.
the observation of breath and body, response and relationship. Um, what are some of the things that come to mind for you? Like how do
Yeah.
these two?
It's interesting. So for the majority of my career, I think most people have found me through the Enneagram. And then I'm like sneaking them yoga therapy under the table. Like they don't realize what's happening until they're like breathing and moving. And then they're like, wait, why do I feel so different? But I've recently had the opportunity to work with somebody who came to me for yoga therapy first and didn't know anything about the Enneagram. And what was so cool to realize, like kind of going back to this question of how you discover your type, we had been, let's see, we were at 6 sessions before I even like offered Enneagram wisdom. And she had been, so at that point, she had been working her practice for almost every single day for like 3 months, 4 months almost. So like she clicked with this practice almost immediately, right? Breath work, gentle movement, right? Things that allowed her to slow down, conscious movement, breath work, meditation, all guided to kind of support her in where she was at in her life. When it came time to talk Enneagram, she was already experiencing kind of this like deep well of, I almost want to say contentment. Like she's kind of a, I might say a not an exception, but she's really someone I like to highlight because everything happened for her so fast. She like reached out to me. She's like, I don't like my job. I don't like my life. These pieces need to be moved. I'm having all of these issues, blah, blah, blah. We get into it. She's doing the practice. She's doing the stuff. And then she's like, look at all these things and how much they've changed. Now in a different job that I love, things over here are fixing like really cool, again, kind of magical stuff,
Some
right?
quick manifestation there.
Quick manifestation. Sometimes it happens like that.
Yeah.
Like it's fun to
Like
watch.
you get that flow.
Yeah, right. And again, it's like it also is a function of how she is related to her practice,
Mhm.
right? There was a lot of
Dedicated.
room made. Yeah, dedicated. And that every time you come to it, right, it's digging a little more out.
Yeah.
And so when it came time to talk Enneagram, it was so easy. Also, because in our conversations, I've had more time to get to know her. I have some ideas, right? I'm not rigid in that, but like, I'm like, this keeps coming up. Like, this piece here is coming up a lot. So I'm gonna like, I'm tracking that back here. We went through, and what I usually do is I'll often start people with a typing interview. That's kind of the first piece. I go through, I ask them a whole bunch of questions,
So
right?
yeah, this is getting the approach piece that I definitely want to pull in.
Yeah.
Just
The
your
approach of
process.
how to discover your type, right? I start folks with a typing interview where I'm asking lots and lots of questions. And then it's my job to kind of, I use the words reflect and connect. I'm reflecting to you what you've said, where your energy has kind of perked up, where you feel kind of whatever. Like I'm reflecting back to you. And then I'm helping you connect the dots in the system,
Mhm.
right? Like here, these, when I said this word, you really lit up. That makes me think this. We go through that process, we ask questions, we do some back and forth, and then I'm like, okay, now we're going to talk about the types, right? This is what a 3 looks like. This is what a 5 looks like. This is what a 6 looks like. This is what an 8 looks like. I usually, in a typing interview, I'll offer 2 or 3 different types, and we do some back and forth, right? I'm like, this is what it is, kind of. How does that land for you? And they're like, well, yes, but there's always these things. And then we talk about those things. We hash it out because
Mhm.
that's the beautiful thing about the Enneagram. Any small descriptor you give of the type, it never encapsulates the whole thing,
Yeah.
right? So I give a small descriptor and then it's like, yeah, but. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, that brings us to this part of the type. That brings us to maybe a different type. Like, oh, these things are in common with these 2 types, but this one responds to this thing in this way. Right. So it's much more exploratory and it's much more collaborative than just taking a test or having a friend type you. Right. Um, and that was kind of the process. And what was amazing with this client that I have, because she had already had so much space, the self-reflection pieces were so much easier.
Mhm.
It took like a fraction of the time. And she was like, no, I can really hear myself in what you're saying.
Wow.
And that's one of the biggest pieces is being able to know yourself well enough that when you hear it, it's like you hear your name and you recognize it. You're like, oh, that's me. Like, oh, that's
Yeah.
me.
Well, that is the thing is that often the one that kind of irks you the most or makes you go, ugh, like,
Yeah.
oh,
There's a
that might
there's
be a
a
hint.
yeah, there's a vulnerability here,
Oh,
right? That
yeah.
is so I always tell people it's like you don't know that these things are running your life, but everyone else knows, right? And then to have like to for it to be so obvious that it's like written in a book somewhere, and then you read that, you're like, oh, like
I've had broccoli
everybody
in my teeth
knows.
the whole time. Like,
Like, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly what it feels like. And so I think the more you know yourself and the more comfortable you are with yourself, the easier this process becomes, right? There is that sense of clarity of like, oh, okay, that I can accept that that's a little cringy, I don't love that part of myself, and it's a little, um, but I can own that it's me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the yoga therapy does a lot to support the compassion, the
Mm,
self-compassion that you can,
absolutely.
like that in the constant practice and the breathing and the touching in, it's going to break open that little compassion so that when you're
Yeah.
seeing yourself in a number, you're not going to berate yourself as much. You're just going to go, oh,
Exactly.
it's just a mirror
Yep.
and it's not
Yep.
a weapon. It's not
Yep.
it's a tool. So I can
Hmm.
see myself. Thank
Yeah.
heavens. Yeah. What, like different ages, so, we have
Mhm.
kids,
Yeah.
you type them when they're little, you type them how does it work? What's the appropriate
That's
age?
actually so interesting, because so I first of all don't type other people. Like, right, just don't do it, especially not your kids, because they always surprise you. But what has been so interesting is that um, I'm a certified, professionally trained Enneagram teacher and coach, and so is my wife. Um, and so at some point, it came up with our kids literally this week. They started asking about it like more intentionally. Like they've always been a little bit like, "What are you talking about?" And then we're like, "Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out when you're older." And like this was literally last night. They were like, "No, like tell me what's up. Like let's actually do this. Let's actually ask the questions and let's actually
How
like."
old are they?
So our youngest is 12
Okay.
and our oldest is about to be 15.
This is true coming of age time.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And so and we're big proponents that like, hey, don't box yourself into this. Um, they asked, they know what we do. Like it is one of these like complicated situations where it's like I would probably never do a typing interview for anyone under 18. Like ideally you'd be 25 before you started like really diving into
Well, don't you
this.
have to have like enough wherewithal to
Yeah,
know
you
how
have to
you
have a
are?
prefrontal cortex
Yeah.
that's fully developed. You have to have lived some life, and with that, you have to have the capacity to relate to this without identifying with it, right?
Oh.
Like, and that's the fear with typing kids, especially,
Hmm.
is that then they get this piece inside themselves like, well, oh, I'm a 2, or oh, I'm a 9, or oh, I'm a 5. And then they live into that as
That would be
if
dangerous. Hmm.
without allowing themselves to develop more naturally. I don't really like using that word, but you get the gist,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
without that added pressure to live into something. Um, I have worked with other kids who, like their parents were really big into it, and they were in kind of a similar situation to where my wife and I were, where it was like, they're asking, what do we do? Like, and so my thing has always been like, let them ask, right? Let them show interest in it. And then it was our job to like walk them through it as best we could while being very hands off. Like, we've worked with like educated guesses with our kids for a while, right? Because you can't help
Yeah.
it, right? Like
Yeah.
it just happens. You're like, that's some stuff. Um, but what we see might not be what they're experiencing.
Well, and does a lot of it have to do with motivation? Meaning,
Exactly.
yeah, where
Yeah,
they're
it's like,
coming from. If
what
they
are you
don't,
motivated by? What are you trying to get? What is the thing that is driving you? Different motivations can drive the same behavior. Different behaviors can be driven by the same motivation,
which,
right?
which is why
So
those tests don't work because they're just testing your
exactly.
behaviors.
Yeah, we don't have a way to test for motivation.
Uh,
Motivation is something you have to discover for yourself.
because you often don't even know it.
Yeah, exactly. Like you have to figure that out
Yeah.
before you can even really engage with the Enneagram. Again, kind of going back to the yoga therapy aspect and why this was such a breeze with this client is like she was engaged in the work, right? Like she had gotten some clarity around the way she was operating and why. And that made moving into the Enneagram so much easier. But with our kids, honestly, they both talked about resonating with types that surprised my wife and I. We were like, huh, interesting that you
Yeah.
see yourself that way. That's not how we've seen you, right? And so, I don't want to like double down on that, but it's like really good information that like, oh, at least at this point in time, I think adolescence is particularly challenging. And you'll see this in lots of Enneagram books, but there is a way in which adolescence is a very four-esque experience
The number
for,
four.
yeah, for
Yeah.
everyone, right?
Well, it's
So
that
like,
individual and
yeah, and
there can be
I'm a
angst.
tortured artist, yes,
Yeah.
and I'm angsty, and if you ask a four, they'll be like, yeah, I never really grew out of that.
I see.
Like there is a way in which that has stayed with me and has been incredibly present throughout my adult life, where most of us, because four is only one type, most of us move out of that and don't stay in that kind of space. This isn't to say that fours are immature, but there is something about that angsting and that longing and this kind of emotional turmoil that you experience during adolescence, that the fours say, yeah, I want more of that, and they're going to bring it with them.
I
Where the
see.
rest of us are like, no, we're done. I don't want any more of that.
Yeah, would you say that you're born with your number, or is it a way that you survive your childhood, or is it something that
Mm.
comes in?
This is a fascinating question.
Oh, yeah, I
And
don't
I
even
think
know.
yeah, right. Like it definitely goes right to the heart of like all these questions that we're asking ourselves, right? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Um, what is so funny, and I love telling this story because it's one of my favorite stories. I was in my Enneagram training with the narrative Enneagram in Menlo Park, California. And like I'm sitting at the feet of the masters. Like we're
Mm.
talking people who've been doing this since the 70s, right? Like just profoundly, profoundly impactful teachers and practitioners of this tool. And Peter O'Hanrahan told this story about how in the early days, they were all like, all the Enneagram teachers were like, oh, this is how you survived your childhood. You are this because your parents did that, right? Like it seems so clear to them. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's clearly how this works. And that was also kind of more of the approach of the times, psychologically speaking, and what people were talking about in, the psychology community. Um, and I'll never forget just how deadpan Peter delivered this. And he was just like, and then we all started having kids. And it was just like, oh yeah. And he's like,
Little humilities. Yeah.
uh-huh. Well, and not even humility, but just like this deeper awareness, right? That like, oh, I've been saying these things and now I'm experiencing something that is very counter to that. And so what most teachers will tell you is that while it's probably not likely that we're born with type fully formed within us, we have some sort of disposition, right? We have a little bit of something on the hard drive. And then there is an addition. How are we surviving what we experience as children, right? Like we have a disposition, we may have some deep-seated things that we want, and then the conditions of our childhood will only allow us to get those things if we do X, Y, and Z, right?
If
So
we
it's,
access them, like if we need to
yeah, like
pull them in to
yeah, like
survive or
there may be certain things about like, well, I do want to feel connected, but I only feel connected when I'm strong, right? Like I definitely want to feel safe, but I in my household, I only get to feel safe if I'm helpful, right?
yeah.
So there's ways that these things can combine, right? And then in our tiny baby pure essence experience, we start to fuse things together, right? Like
Like
we're
bones, like your skull.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? Like we're putting pieces together, we're becoming solid. And that's kind of what's happening with our personality and our type structure. Most teachers say by about 6 to 8, personality is kind of set. It's not always true, but that's kind of it's like, some little kids and you're like, yeah, you see them
That's
growing
who
up,
they
you're like,
are.
that tracks,
Yeah.
like you talk to kindergarten teachers and they're like, yeah, I still recognize you. Like, I know what's up. Um, so, it's this kind of combination of nature and nurture Um, and again, it's like you don't know what your kids are experiencing, and you don't know what your kids are trying to get, right? Um, and so even when they say, I think at this young age, for my wife and I, we're like, oh, this is really interesting. Like our oldest could be something very different than what we expected. Okay, and then just like give a lot of space for that. And even if, one of them comes back and like, I'm definitely this, like, okay, so hands off. Like, I don't want the Enneagram for them to become something uh, that they have to wrestle and overcome when they're older.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
I
we have
want them
enough
to feel.
labels. We have enough
Yeah,
labels.
exactly. And we have enough unhelpful labels, and I think, whether how helpful or unhelpful a label is has a lot to do with how it's reinforced or not or dismissed when you're younger. And so I'm just like, yeah, you have that. I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to say no. I'm just going to be very neutral about it. And you have your own experience with it. Um, and that's kind of always my approach when people talk about like, well, what do I do with my kids?
Hmm.
Well, you just you
Let them
you
be
really
kids.
just don't do anything. Like
Yeah.
let them be kids.
Yeah.
And if they say there's something, great. If they say there's something different the next day, also great. Just like go with it. Just like go with the flow. It's gonna be fine.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
One thing that I think about with kind of starting to consider your own number, I've heard it said it can be helpful to look at who you were more in your youth. Like
Mm-hmm.
kind of I take that as like when your ego is being formed, what made you go
Mm.
want to do stuff.
Yeah.
And then I put that next to the work of Richard Rohr and his book Falling Upward, which is about the first and second half of life, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
you go through, it's done unto you through great
Hmm.
love or great suffering. So part of my question is, do you find it more helpful to do it kind of before that second half of life shift?
Mm.
Or do people tend to come to you after or during life is falling apart through great love or great suffering?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure this out. So
Yeah.
I guess the question is, do we look at ourselves in our youth
Mm.
when ego was forming? And then what happens later when the whole thing falls apart?
Yeah. My thing is, you come to it when you come to it. And the caveat is, uh, a lot of people come to it when shit's falling apart.
Yeah.
Like, I know very few people who have had meaningful experiences with the Enneagram who didn't discover it when their life was like in shambles.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know why. Maybe it's just because like that's when you're ready to hear it. Um,
Well,
but
like
that's
nothing else
just
is working. So here's,
yeah,
I'll try
right. Like
this.
that's kind of the the caveat I have. But I've had plenty of people come to me when early in life when they're like, I heard about this thing on a podcast and I want to use. I'm like, okay, great. And then I've heard lots of people like after that shift, and they're like, I need more support in like building what this new life looks like. Um, as far as like discovering your type, I think there is some value in this, like looking at when you were younger. I think that that's helpful. What I've started using as a phrase to guide people, that I've found to be maybe the most supportive, especially if you are older, right? Like I think anybody who's developed some self-awareness but is generally younger, so like under 40, there is a way that like, okay, like not as much life has been lived. It's a little bit easier to be like that. Not always, but sometimes. And then for people who are older, especially people who are older who've already been engaged in their journey in some way, um, what I often tell people is like, don't just look at when you were younger, but like, tell me about the arc of your development, right? You are not the same person you were 10 years ago or 10 years before that.
Yeah.
um, what has been your journey? Like, if you were to describe the ways in which you have grown and changed, what does that look like? And then we're not looking at a static moment like in our past, but we're looking at where that moment has taken us and what route we have taken to get where we are.
Mhm.
And I find that to be a much more helpful and supportive question. Like if you'd asked me when if you'd asked me to reflect on my life when I was like, that 18 to 22, all I could really tell you was that I was a hot mess, right? Like, good Lord. And I look back on that and I'm like, if that were my, if that were the thing I were trying to base my type off of, I probably would have identified as a four because there was so much emotional turmoil, right, in that space. Like, again, hot mess. Um, but if I was to look at the journey from 18 to 22 to 30, right, it's been about slowing down. It's been about softening. It's about becoming more emotionally sensitive, right? Those are very specific things that align me with a type.
Mhm.
And I identify as a type 8, right? And that is the eight's journey. And I think seeing the journey more than just the box itself is often much more helpful for people.
Oh my gosh. You're painting a beautiful picture about this. And I'm wondering if kind of watching it as a journey, is that what you mean by the narrative? You mentioned that the way you go
Yeah.
about it is through a narrative. I don't know what
Uh,
style or
so what I was referencing at that point is the narrative Enneagram, which is a school of Enneagram training. Um, and that's like the name of it, but it's also the name of the approach that they use. So the narrative Enneagram is based on the narrative tradition, which is we learn the types and we learn the system through hearing other people's stories. So the panels are a huge part of the narrative tradition, right? So you get several people of the same type talking about what it's like to be their type. And then you can see how diverse the type is. You can see how big the box is, but you also get to very clearly see the box.
Mhm.
You're like, you are three totally different people,
And yet.
but all three of you have this thing that's
Mhm.
like very common to each other. And we often say that that's one of the best ways for you to discover your type. So if you're not doing a typing interview or you want to try and figure it out on your own, the best thing to do would be to watch panels. And there are tons on the internet. You can check out my YouTube channel and my podcast and other things.
Great. Yeah, we're going to
But
link to all of this. So,
we'll link to all that.
and we
But
should,
what
yeah.
becomes so interesting is like you read words on a page, cool, whatever. You can probably find yourself a little bit in most of them. But all of a sudden, you start listening to people share their experience. All of a sudden, you hear someone speaking your language, right?
It's so touching. It is
It
like,
really is. And it's not even that like, it's like maybe language isn't quite the right word, but it's like you hear somebody speaking with your accent. They could be saying whatever, but it's like, oh,
yeah.
I hear that's how I see things. That's how I feel things. This feels so resonant. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to train with the narrative tradition. Um, because it's so relational and so communal in that way.
Mhm.
There are some downsides, right? Like sometimes people mistype and they talk about their types and you got to be careful because you start to notice like you're saying all the right things, but you're saying it in the wrong accent,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
like there's certain things you can like pay
Yeah.
attention to. But all that said, it's I think one of the best ways to come to understand your type is just hearing how other people talk about it, right? Because it lands for you in such a different way. There is a way that like when there are eights in the room, we just sort of like I just sort of get them,
Mhm.
right? And like if we're both feeling pretty good and we're not trying to like compete with each other, like elbow each other out of the room for space or whatever, then like there's this like really great kind of just like camaraderie that comes for it. It's like, yeah, I see you. And they're like, yeah, I see you. And it's like, yeah, it feels nice to be seen. And
Yeah.
it feels nice to see myself and someone else.
Yeah.
Um, but that's the narrative. There's also several other like very reputable schools. We call the narrative tradition kind of West Coast Enneagram. It's based It started, outside Berkeley, California, was based in Menlo Park for a while. Now I think the headquarters has moved to Boulder at this point. But then we have like East Coast Enneagram with like Don Riso, Russ Hudson, the guys who wrote the Big Blue Book, or the Wisdom of the Enneagram is what it's called. Um, they have a slightly different approach, still very, very good, but just slightly different approach. And then we have kind of the middle of the road, essentially the Jesuits. And that's where we get like Richard Rohr and that sort of thing. So like all the Enneagram stuff came to, outside Berkeley in the like mid 70s, and then spread out and kind of split up and took their own different directions. So it's a little Enneagram
What
history
did
for
it, when it came there, where did it come from in the
you.
70s?
Chile and Argentina. So to give you like the long history, G.I. Gurdjieff, George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, brought the symbol and kind of what it represented to the West in like 1910-ish.
This is something that he developed.
Well, he didn't. So he is real cagey about where the symbol itself came from. But this was kind of his whole shtick, is that like this is some secret esoteric knowledge. Maybe he came up with it. Maybe he like whatever. But like he's like, no, it's some secret thing that's been developed from ages past. He called himself a seeker after truth. And, he developed his own school of kind of psycho-spiritual development. Um, and if you talk to anybody who's really into what's called the Gurdjieff work, and you say that you're into the Enneagram of personality, they're going to look at you like you're stupid, which is, funny little like off branches. But essentially, he taught this symbol, right? The circle with the triangle and the funny shape inside it as sacred geometry. He didn't
Uh-huh.
talk anything about personality, right?
Oh,
He was just saying this is a way to understand things. This is the way energy becomes manifest in the world,
okay.
was essentially what he was talking about. Then one of his students, probably on some sort of psychedelic trip, was like, had this download that he developed 108 enneagons, is what he said, which was essentially applications of this sacred geometry onto specific things. And he came up with like 108 of them.
The
And it was
sacred
some,
number.
yeah, right, some mystical experience that this dude had. And then one of his students, Claudio Naranjo, was a psychoanalyst, and he's like, oh, this symbol and the kind of principles behind it align to what I'm seeing in all my psychoanalytic clients. And this is where the Enneagram of personality was born. So Naranjo developed kind of he did the work of mapping. Essentially, he was mapping neuroses. He was mapping different people's, major
Neuroses.
issues onto this energetic map. And then that's what he brought to the US in the mid 70s. From there, it has grown and developed into all these different offshoots and branches and different ways to use it. But pretty much everything that we see in the United States when we say Enneagram is the Enneagram of personality. Like
Mhm.
that's the specific thing. Where the Enneagram itself is just a symbol.
I
It's
see.
just the symbol that we see.
Okay.
And then how we apply that symbol will determine what is it the Enneagram of. We can talk about the Enneagram of process, like how things come into being, the stages of experience. We can talk. There's like so many, but we tend to generally fall into the Enneagram of personality. That's what people talk about. That's when they say, "Oh, there's types." They're
That's what
talking
we're talking
about
about.
personality. Yeah.
I'm wondering if part of the intention of the person engaging with Enneagram and observing themselves is eventually to essentially transcend their number and access the energy of all the numbers. So that like is that a thing? Is the
Uh,
transcendence a thing? Like is a three ever not gonna three?
I mean, is the transcendence a thing? Yes. Can you do anything to bring that transcendence about? No.
It happens unto you. Yep.
Yes, it happens unto you. It is a
Yep.
grace.
Yep.
And most of us experience small graces, right? Um, and if that were just kind of the whole of how this system worked, nobody would really engage with it, right? Like if it's just at the end of the day, it's just like, Shit, I don't know. Like it would not have the popularity that it has today. Um,
Well, don't you have to know the system in order to transcend the system? You have to know yourself in order to transcend the system. Like conquer the box before you leave the box.
um, yes and no. Plenty of people have grace experiences long before they actually know who they are. Like I'm totally open to that. I actually think that it's those experiences, like those touch-ins of no self and those touch-ins of deep grace that actually inspire us to go on this journey.
Because you're trying to kind of feel that
Yeah, you're
again.
like, oh, what was that? Like,
Yeah.
oh, there's like, oh, I'm seeing behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Whoa, cool.
And so this is a lens to help you
Yeah,
or a
yeah, and
tool to pull the
yeah, and I
veil.
think what this does is while I don't think it eradicates your personality or it changes your patterns, I think the my my theology, my spirituality, my work with the Enneagram, everything that I do comes down to, does it work?
Mm.
How does it work? Does it make your life better? For me, it must be profoundly and foundationally pragmatic. Otherwise, I don't
Otherwise,
give
it's
a
a party
shit.
trick.
Yeah, right. I don't give a shit. I don't
Yeah.
care about any of that. And I don't care if it's about the Enneagram or about your faith or about what you believe in, anything. Anything. If it's not practical and actionable, get it out of my face.
Hmm.
That's how I feel. I love having deep theological, spiritual conversations. I love like the esoteric and the scientific and all these things. But at the end of the day, none of that's going to change my life unless
You
it
put
is
it into action.
practical and is actionable.
I I'm on board with that.
Yeah,
Totally.
right.
That's why we love these different
Yeah,
tools. It's like it works. Use
it's
it.
a tool.
Yeah.
It only works if you use it. And
Hmm.
so I think for me, the practical and the very actionable work of the Enneagram, I frame it like literally like a tool. When you land in your personality, you got a hammer. And if all you got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and you will do a lot of damage that way. If, though, you have a hammer and you have a screwdriver and you have a saw and you have a pry bar and you have a nail gun and you have, right, like the more tools you have, the more you are able to build.
So those other tools might be drawing from your Ayurveda, drawing from the sutras, drawing from your faith, drawing from
Absolutely. It,
labyrinth,
it also
drawing,
might
yeah,
be like drawing
chakras.
from the energy of other types, right? Like I'm an eight
Ah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
can see how my eightness gets me so far and it gets me there really well.
Hmm.
And then it stops right there because it doesn't go any farther. And then I might need, well, you know what? My seven energy allows me to do these things.
Yep.
Being able to think about and tap into my heart center, like a two or a four or even a three, allows me to do other things. And this isn't to say I am those types. I will always be an eight. There's no getting around it until I have been struck by grace and I shed this sense of self completely. I'm going to be an eight.
I
Cool.
think that's what I was getting to when I was asking about the
Yeah.
transcending is able to access the energies of the other numbers,
Yeah.
no
And it's
longer
it's
sitting in your
less a
own.
transcendence of your own type and more a fluidity in
Yeah.
moving into others,
Well
right?
said.
You're always going to kind of rubber band back.
Yeah.
Like that's the facts of it. But you're able to reach and find what you need from other spaces, from other energies,
Yeah.
right? Like what tool is going to meet this moment most appropriately? Like I have my set of tools that I'm really, really, really good with, right? And then I have these other tools that like I'm okay with. And then I have some tools that I'm really going to fumble with. And then I have some tools I just stay away from. And it's like, okay, how can I expand my tool belt in order to meet more of life as it's presented to me?
I think that is a beautiful explanation of why. It's
Yeah.
helpful and useful.
Yeah.
As we're pulling up here at the end of our time, I've been asking one question of all my guests, and it's
Okay.
going to be a little bit out of left field, but I'm
I
sure
don't,
you're going to
we'll
pull
we'll
this
figure it out.
together beautifully.
Okay.
Just thinking about the labyrinth as metaphor
Mhm.
of one's
Mhm.
life. And I love to talk about those threshold moments. So, what I've been asking my guests is, can you share with us a moment or a time, maybe it's in the past, maybe it's happening right now, that you recognize you're at a threshold and that first step has or will make all the difference?
Mm.
Maybe you knew where you were going and maybe you stepped into the unknown.
Um, Actually, my answer is from the past and is from not only the time that I was introduced to the Enneagram and to yoga, but also the first time I um, was ever introduced to a labyrinth as a spiritual practice. Um, Oddly enough, all of these things happened within 3, 4 months of each other in the same
Mhm.
place. Um, I was living in a small town in Arkansas. I had crash landed there because my life had fallen apart in pretty much every sense of the word. Um, I was struggling to come out um, because my family was not accepting, and I was currently living with my family. I was living with my grandmother at the time. Again, because I had crash landed and I had nowhere else to go.
There's Granny.
Yeah, yeah. And she was wonderfully kind and loving and also problematic and homophobic. We contain multitudes. And I stumbled into a small community that uh, frankly saved my life. And when I look back, I see this time in this small town as this profound threshold experience. I was only there for about 2 years. So in the grand scheme of things, not very long. But it was kind of like I stepped into this whirlpool and and then suddenly I was on the other side of it and everything about my life had changed in a profound and beautiful way. The people and the practices that I found there that scooped me up and picked me up and dusted me off, um, and told me that I was worth something. Uh, they are the reason I am where I am today.
Mm.
Um, and I think of one, I mean, there was a community for sure, but I think of one person in particular who helped shepherd me into this community. It was now very lovingly called my Uncle Ben. Um, Not actually my uncle, although I had lots of uncles in that town. Like I had a lot of family in that town. Like if you'd thrown a rock, you would have hit somebody I was related to. Um, but this is my Uncle Ben, and he actually had a labyrinth at his house. Um, and at one point, he was the one who introduced me to this kind of ragtag queer community, this kind of like underground group of folks who we all found each other in this small, super conservative town. The town at one point had the Guinness Book of World Records for most churches per capita, to give you a sense of the vibe there. Um, and Uncle Ben, at one point, shortly after he introduced me to this amazing community, I needed a job, and he gave me a job at his landscaping business. And so he had like most of the city contracts. He'd been doing this for a long time, and so his home property was gorgeous. And every morning he would go out and he would walk the labyrinth, and he told us, he's like, I go out and I walk the labyrinth, and every morning I walk the labyrinth and I pray for my nieces and nephews. And I feel very fortunate that I get to be considered one of the beneficiaries of that like love and kindness. And he taught me about what walking a labyrinth is and does. And since then, I've found opportunities to walk them as often as I can. Um, and it is a reminder of this kind of beautiful, mystical, magical threshold experience, right? And it felt very much like walking a labyrinth, where it's like, I think I'm going this way, and then there's a real hard left, and I thought I was almost to the end, and now I have a lot longer to go. And then and you're walking and you're walking and you're walking, and then suddenly you are on the other side of everything. And that's just kind of the magic of it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So you just paint pictures of your life so beautifully. I'm very touched by your story, and
Mm.
I feel very honored that you shared it with us. That's
Yeah.
um, I appreciate that. Right? Not even knowing what that question would be, and you went there. So way to
Yeah.
be vulnerable.
I'm out here trying to do the work.
You're doing
I
it
will say that.
and helping others. So tell us, how do others find you? You have a multitude of ways, and we have time to.
Yes. I mean, the fastest way is consciousenneagram.com. That's the hub of all of my work. You can find events there. You can find my podcast there. You can find my Substack there. You can find all of the things through consciousenneagram.com. I'm also Conscious Enneagram on Instagram. That's probably the social media I'm the most present to. I'm also Conscious Enneagram on YouTube, and you can check that out.
And that's what the panels are and things like that.
Yes,
So people.
there are panels there. You can also check out Conscious Construction, which is the name of my podcast. That's where panels are as well if you want to listen instead of watch. I believe, if I remember correctly, the YouTube channel only has short clips of the panels, like short 5-10 minute clips, and then the full panel episodes are on my podcast. Which again, you can search Conscious Enneagram on pretty much any podcast player and it will come up. Conscious Enneagram or Conscious Construction is the actual name of it.
The name of your
And
book?
yes, the name of my book is The Conscious Enneagram.
No.
So I kept everything
I'm
very aligned.
I'm impressed.
The only problem with my branding is that there are two words that are very hard for people to spell. So, uh,
I
and they're
struggle with conscious.
long. So,
It's
yeah,
an
you can check
opportunity to
out.
grow.
Yeah, you got to work on it. But it's you can find me in all those places. Also, if you like bikes, I am everywhere at Queer Gravel. That's also where a lot of my work ends up as well. There's some strange intersections there, so I like to shout that out. Yeah, and I'm always down to chat with people, shoot me an email, slide in my DMs on Instagram, whatever. Uh, yeah, and I am writing pretty regularly. I've taken a little bit of break, but I'm writing pretty regularly on my Substack, and that's a place where I like to send people for like, this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I think, in fact, on my Substack, I recommend you.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you got
probably a clear
cycle.
path
Yes,
right over
love
there.
it.
Good. This
Yeah,
has been so fun and so informative and so rich. I can't thank you enough
yeah. I'm
for
so glad.
sharing.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here and to get to chat with you. Yeah, this is my jam. I love talking about this stuff. We could do it for another 2 hours as far as I'm concerned.
I guess we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, we can always circle back around later.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Abby.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess.
If something in this conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to stay connected. You can visit runetoevolve.com, where you'll find my weekly blog, more podcast episodes, and practices to support you in your own unfolding. If you haven't already, you can subscribe there to receive reflections and resources straight to your inbox. It's a simple way to stay in the conversation and continue exploring what's calling you forward. And if this episode spoke to you, feel free to share it with a friend or leave a review. It really helps others find their way into this space. Next up, I'll be sharing a Labyrinth Walk companion inspired by this conversation. So if you're feeling the nudge to move, reflect, and integrate, that will be a beautiful place to continue. And as you go, may you trust what is stirring within you, even if it doesn't yet make sense. May you have the courage to follow the quiet call and the patience to let it unfold in its own time. Much love.